A Man Speaketh by Richard Wilson. This story, which is correctly misspelled as you see it, was originally published in the May 1969 issue of Galaxy magazine, republished in 3 anthologies: World's Best Science Fiction, 1970, in the titular year, Science Fiction Stories 32 in 1974, and The Last Man on Earth in 1982. It also appeared in 2 collections of the author's stories, The Story Writer and Other Stories in 2011 and Masters of Science Fiction, Richard Wilson, in 2018. Read by Darrell T. Smith II for my channel, Quasar Spectra. A Man Speaketh. 1. Marty. Don't read this. It's in Old English, and the spelling is different. Quote, "Jangling is when a man speaketh too much beforn folk, and clappeth as a mill, and taketh no keep what he saith." End quote. Now that you've read it anyway, you bright ones, I'll tell you that Geoffrey Chaucer wrote it in The Parson's Tale. What he said was, but I needn't translate. You probably had no more trouble with it than if you'd been listening to the kind of English disc jockeys once spoke on rock radio stations. This is a story of a jangler nearly 700 years removed from Geoffrey's time. It's the tale of a disc jockey named Jabber McAbber, which he sometimes called himself. At other times, at other contemporary music stations, as they called themselves, he was known as Esoteric Ed, or Happy Mac, or James the First, for he moved on. He moved from Cincinnati to Akron to Chicago to Phoenix. He dreamed of making the big time in New York, but that call never came. Another kind of call came, though. It came in Phoenix, where he took the fancy of an eccentric billionaire who owned, among things and people, a radio-television network, an advertising agency, a movie studio, a publishing house, a university, several electronics companies, a city of some size in the Southwest. He owned most of the real estate and enough of the politicians, one way or another, and a deactivated rocket base in the desert. You know the name of the billionaire and the single-minded determination with which he went after anything he wanted. More about him later. Our disc jockey's real name was Edward James McHenry. He was 38 years old now, and sometimes he had to force it. The old spontaneity wasn't always there. The drive had ebbed. The zing had zung. Once the words had tumbled out, more of them than he could articulate, but now it took an effort to make them flow. His delivery was more deliberate, not rehearsed, but thought out. It comforted him to know his plight was not unique. A writer had told him of times when it took a monumental effort to roll a sheet of paper into the typewriter. He'd known artists who'd said similar. He'd known poets, too, and peasants. "Oh, yes, I've known poets and peasants and pallbearers and priests, and princes crossed my path, or I theirs, in foreign climes and on native shores, for princes travel. And I've known princesses, native-born like Grace K. Rainier and Rita H. Kahn, and those of alien corn like Elizabeth and Margaret, not to mention what's-her-name and whose-is. But I've strayed from my theme, which is music, so I'll get off and spin a record, as we used to say before tape. Spin with me, won't you, as we enjoy the sounds of the Jefferson Airplane." 2 minutes and 40 seconds later, he was on again. He'd prepared for the end of the music. In the old days, it would have been off the cuff, off the top of the head, off the world. "Wasn't that the most? Where can you go from there except elsewhere? And so we spin you on, you spinnable people, to the obligatory scene, if you remember Drama 201. We spin you, I say, to this word from our sponsor, this important announcement. Friends, fellow human beings, mortals like me, are you troubled with irregularity?" He went on too long, unnecessarily identifying, stretching it out. You may have wondered who's been talking here, besides Ed. I mean, words don't come out of a void, especially when they're not Ed's words, and Ed's the last man alive. I've been talking. Me. Marty. I'm a machine. That's what the first letter of my acronym stands for. My full name is Machine Amplifying Rationalizations Treating of Your. Or maybe it's Machine Assessing Reality as Told to You. It doesn't matter. The acronym makers are long gone. I realize that, as a machine, I should be positive. I shouldn't tell you different things, or variations of the same thing, and claim there's no real difference. To do this is to be guilty of what somebody called terminological inexactitude. I think the somebody was Winston Churchill. Of course, I don't really mean I really think. That would be a lie, and it would not do to have a machine capable of lying, especially since one of my functions is to amend, correct, edit, amplify, and otherwise make more meaningful for posterity the mouthings of esoteric Ed. But first, let's listen some more to Ed. Ed. Sometimes I tell different stories up here in the lonely. I make up alternate pasts for myself. I use different names for my different pasts, for my different moods. Some days I'm Gaylord Guignol, sole survivor of a destroyed world and devil-may-care chronicler of its last agony. Except that I do care. My nonchalance disguises the deep hurt I felt and feel at the death of Earth. Sometimes I'm Hank Hardcastle, steely-eyed hero of 1,000 thrilling adventures, scion of a near-noble family. Other times I'm Harry Protagonist, space disc jockey, who's been set whirling in the void on an unfathomable mission. I need to communicate my fears, hopes, fantasies, and above all, my puzzlement to my imagined listeners. Sometimes I forget who I really am. A person can tamper just so long with what he is, pretending to be another before he becomes, to some extent, one of those other selves. Then his own self is lost or blurred. Too much blurring is bad. It's desirable sometimes to hide from oneself, to pretend, to merge the ego into a fantasy personality, to live or dream vicariously, but I may be overdoing it. Who am I really? Does it matter as long as I get through the day? I owe myself and you, my listeners, that much. It is my duty to you and to myself. But a certain tranquility is needed to reach the end of the day. Some achieved this by natural talent, by their very vivaciousness or stick-to-itiveness. Doggedly, they breathed in and out and took sustenance from time to time and went to the bathroom to rid themselves of the residue of previous sustenance takings, and did a little work, and lo, it was a new day. Some never achieved the new day. They funked it. They flunked out. Others got there, though, by drink or drugs or pot. I speak of back then. You understand, before the now. You may have noticed that I'm not always lucid, though once in a nightclub I was Larry Lucid, explainer of contemporary society to those less informed. But I coped. I used music. I always had something on, either on the hi-fi or the radio. I used to bounce through the day on a big beat that included me in because it just naturally assumed that everybody was a part of it and approved and throbbed along with it, and so I was one with all that went on. But that was long ago, and now I'm part of nothing because nothing is going on. The only thing that goes on is what I make happen, and even that may not be real. They've done something to me. I feel banded like a Canadian duck. I don't have a circlet around wrist or ankle, but I know something's got me somewhere. Maybe I've been implanted. I've already been tapped and bugged. I read once that some ornithologists had attached a radio to a condor to find out how far it went for food or to rest or whatever condors do to get by. I didn't find out whether the condor knew it had been bugged, but I know something's been done to me and I resent it. I don't mind doing my bit for science, but if they've tampered with my human dignity, if they've psyched me in the psyche... Marty. This is Marty again. I'll tell you more about the man who put our hero up here. His name was John Potter Parnell, and because he was a sanitary facilities manufacturer, he was known as Potty, or John. Sometimes he was called Young Potty, to distinguish him from his father, also known as Potty, and to a few inmates as Poopy. Young Potty, at 50, was still in his father's shadow. The old man had founded the business and made the original millions. Hygienic Incorporated manufactured most of the country's and later the world's toilets, urinals, sinks, towel racks, and dispensers of sanitary and prophylactic devices. The millions and then the billions poured in at such a rate that when Poopy retired, Potty could have sat back and let inertia provide opulently for him and all his heirs. But Potty, he really preferred John, had come late to the presidency and wasn't content to let Hygienic expand at a safe, sure rate. He established a foundation that awarded grants for research. He set up an experimental division, hired scientists, and turned them loose to work at their own pace and let him know when they'd got something. He sponsored a competition to design a better bidet. He sent engineers to Washington to see what Hygienic could do in the space program. It was Potty's emissaries to NASA who led to the hiring of Ed. They got him from a subsidiary company, Arizona Air Talk, for which he'd been broadcasting as Jim McHenry, Jock of the Desert. The Jock's music talk show was the despair of competitors in the rock radio game. We'll come back to Ed. Here's some information about me, Marty the Machine. It's not as if I'm a machine singular. I'm the end product of many machines, sophisticated and otherwise. I know everything they know because I'm the synthesis, the reincarnation of all of them. Let me answer your other unspoken question, whoever you are. Why don't I sound like a machine? How come I come on colloquial instead of respectfully, as befits the man-machine relationship, like you, master, me, robot, or solemnly, like the data you have requisitioned are stored in circuits in subtank 4739C of my vast interconnected memory banks. There will be an unavoidable delay while the necessary hookups are made to retrieve this rarely requested material. Nuts. Everything I have is yours, whoever, wherever, and whenever you are, instantly. Sometimes you don't even have to ask. This whole ship is my memory circuit. I extend into every nook, even to places Ed prefers not to think about, like the reconstitution unit. You might almost say I am the ship, but that would be an exaggeration and immodest. If you still think I sound more human than mechanical, it's only natural. Hell, I was made by human beings. How else should I talk? Like Mowgli's wolves or Tarzan's apes? Machines talk good. Like colloquial. Machines have been talking for generations. Ask Victor. Ed. I have this reluctance to eat that keeps me thin. I mean, I'm not bloaty. Old tum don't sag. Old chin ain't double. No dewlaps yet on old cheek flesh. I'm a pretty good specimen by any standards, and I guess it's because I'm abstemious. I don't eat much, certainly not between meals. You wouldn't either if everything you had for dinner was something you'd had 100,000 times before dinner was something you'd had 100,000 times before. It's reconstituted stuff. I mean, I've bought used cars and second-hand boats, and if I'd settled down, I might even have bought a used Oriental rug. But I'd have drawn the line at used food. My folks talked sometimes about the Depression and told about the cheap things they ate, but at least they'd been the first to eat them. They came out of those bad times strong and proud. I sit down to dinner with as much pleasure as an explorer at a cannibal feast. I don't want to eat this stuff, sanitary as it may be, that has already passed at least once through the alimentary canal. And there's no comfort in knowing it's no foreign waterway that's been navigated. It's my own, my native gland. It's an affront to the system, except it's not the system that's outraged. The body can take it. It's the imagination that revolts. It's got this way of exaggerating to the point where you say, never mind what the facts are, things ought to be different. Marty. I have to defend the Reconstitution works against Ed's slander. After all, it's a fellow machine. What comes out of it goes back into Ed perfectly clean. It's cleaner than what he got in those fancy restaurants he enjoyed, and a damn sight more sanitary and nutritious than the weird meals he cooked for himself in his various bachelor apartments. Excuse the digression. I had to get it out of my system, as Ed was getting it out of his. If these notes are published by some future chronicler, some poor M.A. desperate for a new subject for his doctoral dissertation, they could be titled just that, Getting It Out of His System. Ed's trouble is that whatever he gets out goes back in. His only irreversible catharsis is verbal. Or do I mean oral? What I'm trying to do is write a story with no cooperation from my subject. I'm not a trained writer, but I appreciate the difficulties. Of course, I'm not writing in the strict sense. No hands, you know. So I do what he does. Talk, and the words are put down for posterity? Or put up, as preserves are? It's a kind of automatic writing, without slates. Certainly without sleight of hand. If I write or talk too much, put it down or up to my inexperience. For one writes, then he edits. I couldn't really be expected to know very much, consisting, as I do, mostly of a bunch of circuits in and near the whole of this experimental capsule of potty Parnells. My job is to store away, preserve, Ed's meandering mind, or as much of it as he reveals through his on-mic monologues, plus as much more as can be vouchsafed by a machine. They had to trust to a machine because nobody else was going up here with Ed, and nobody did. My knowledge of Ed was gathered piece by piece as people fed into my predecessor machines information provided by interviews with hundreds of people who'd known Ed and talked about him before Potty gave him his job. There is also the information provided by Ed himself, both in direct interviews and during some electronic gastrointestinal spying. It began at Ed's first luncheon date with Potty, when Ed swallowed a miniaturized transmitter embedded in a raw oyster, and it lasted until it had passed through Ed's system. It wasn't as messy as it might seem. Ed was Potty's week-long house guest, and all the bathrooms were part of the hygienics experimental system. Waste products were processed all the time, and it was mere routine to retrieve the device, which had lately left Ed. 2. Ed. It's not fair. Other castaways had their pals along or found them. Crusoe had Friday, and I wonder how they really got through their long weekends. The Swiss Family Robinson had each other. The Lonely Shepherd had his dog, not to mention favored members of his flock. I mean, everybody had somebody, like Holmes had Watson, and Nixon had Agnew, and Bergen had McCarthy. But here I am without a soul. No Sancho Panza, no Tonto, no stooge or straight man, not even a robot. Considering who they are, they might at least have provided me with a faithful dog, Flush. Marty. This is really not bad. I didn't think our untutored subject had it in him to make that double-barreled allusion to Potty Parnell's business and Elizabeth Barrett Browning's dog. There are times when I have more than a grudging admiration for Harry Protagonist or James I, or whoever he thinks he is. He's also full of little sexual references, which is not surprising, considering the state of his deprivation. That business of Crusoe's Friday and the shepherd's favorite. It's a wonder Ed hasn't long since burst from his cell with a hell of a yell. And what? Having burst, whither would he wander? I'm only a machine, it's true, but compared to him, I'm lucky. Being partly electrical, I have plenty of outlets. He has few, other than his mouth, his mic, and his music. I, with no needs, have him. He, with all human needs concentrated in him, does not know I exist. This is sadness. I can't feel it, of course, but I know it intellectually. I should tell you how the doom came. Some astrologer predicted it, and a lot of people, Ed included, laughed. She said she did not want to alarm anybody unnecessarily, but a crack would develop along the spine of the world, and Earth would split apart like a cantaloupe. There'd be no saving anybody. It happened more or less that way. If you pushed button D, I'd spout the whole story, reconstructed from Earth broadcasts sent as the Earth Holocaust was in progress. Ed heard them. He drank a lot as he listened. He cried and cursed, but he was happy that he'd been spared. Relatively happy. He still drinks a lot. Potty had fitted out the satellite for his own eventual use as a holiday space yacht, and had built in a few hidden luxuries. One was a dummy ballast tank holding 1,000 gallons of bourbon. High G. Ennick's chief chemist, who was from an old Kentucky mountain family, had distilled it for Potty's personal use. The bourbon is decanted into a disguised tap. Ed found it accidentally one night. He's made good use of it since. Ed. I wish I had somebody to listen to, somebody as exciting, as witty, as alive as I am. I could play back my own tapes, of course, but there'd be no novelty in that. I know what I've said. It's more exciting now to wonder what I'll say next. I constantly surprise myself. The damnedest things come out, so excellently said, so apt, that I'd be a fool to waste my time with replays. I'm the distillation of all I know, of all everyone's known. I'm the end product of an entire culture. Homer, Shakespeare, Milton, Milton Berle, A. Berle. All that anyone's done lives on only in me. Ain't that a laugh? They used to laugh at me for my literary pretensions, for being a dilettante, for skimming and reading digests or excerpts, for skipping the dull parts and savoring the best of the best. And now here I am alone, the sole repository, the poor schlocky vessel, the greatest by default. Pretty keen, hey boy? Hey, Lionel Trilling. Hey, Norman Podhoritz. Hey, Professor Twit of English Lit. How do you like them apples? Pretty sour, what? Sourer by the hour. Of all the people in the world who might have represented it, don't it just frost you that the residue happens to be little old yours truly, with an IQ about 2 points higher than plant life? Like it or not, I'm what's left. Ready or not, here I come, hell-bent for eternity. Look me over, posterity. Read me and weep. You were expecting maybe some knowledgeable interpreter of the current scene, some fact-packed fellow who could tell you true, like one of those copy readers on the New York Times. No such luck, buddy. You got me is what you got. If they'd had any sense, they'd have packed this tomb the way the Egyptians did, with all the paraphernalia a body might need on the other side. They'd have supplemented me with the things they used to put in time capsules, the Encyclopedia Britannica and the World Almanac and microfilms of the New York Times. They'd have ballasted me with bound volumes of the New Yorker and Harper's and the Atlantic. Had they but known, they could have dispensed with me entirely and packed in a few 100 pounds of reproductions of art treasures of the Louvre and tapes of the Philharmonic and highbrow stuff like that. Instead, they got, and you're stuck with, old excess baggage himself. Me. Depressing, isn't it? But maybe I'm the only monument Earth deserves. Mediocre Max, the modern marvel, second-rate Stu, Nat the nebbish, the lowest common denominator. You know what's here in the way of a tomb for mankind, aside from my life support system and inexhaustible supplies of food and air? Me and my microphone and my records. No books, no microfilms. They used to ask what books you'd take to a desert island. The answer was the Bible, Shakespeare, and an unabridged dictionary. Well, I haven't even got a comic book or the Reader's Digest. I haven't got a World Almanac, or a Sears catalog, or a phone book. Everything that was ever written down on earth exists only in my head, in my poor, thick skull, imperfectly remembered if at all. And there's damn little I can remember even when I put my mind to it. I tried to reconstruct some of the good stuff, but it came out the way it did for the Duke in Huckleberry Finn doing To Be or Not to Be. I think I remember how Mark Twain started it. You don't know about me without you have read a book by the name of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. But that ain't no matter. I recall snatches like that. I put them down when I think of them. I write them in a notebook. The notebook. 260 pages, counting both sides of the paper. There's nothing else to write on. Nothing. So I'm selective in what I put down. I don't write junky stuff that springs to mind, things that got into my head in grade school and never got out, like Go Home, Your Mother's Got Buns, or Mary, Mary, Will You Get Up? We Need the Sheets for the Table. I talk that into the mic. To you great unseen audience out there in Radio Land, you posterity types who might pick it up one day and have the patience to sort me out for what I'm worth as a footnote to a vanished civilization. What I try to preserve on my precious few pages is what's maybe worth remembering exactly, like the 23rd Psalm or the preamble to the Constitution. I go over it in my mind, and sometimes I say it into the mic till I'm sure I've got it right. Then I put it down. It's a mixed-up bag, that book. It's got the aforementioned Shakespeare. Funny what you remember, like Post with haste to incestuous sheets, or when the wind's north-northeast I can tell a hawk from a handsaw. But like the Duke, I can't get past the first few lines of To Be or Not to Be. What a crying shame they had to pick me for the sole survivor, as if anybody did any picking, as if there were a they. Another thing I put down was a line from Ethics 1 at college, and don't ask me who wrote it. It goes, "Everything is what it is and not another thing." I also put down what Popeye said. Not Faulkner's Popeye, the one I remember is Seeger's, in the comic strip. I am what I am. Maybe it's just as good. How about Do Your Thing? Is that less worthy of preservation because it welled up out of the folk talk of the 60s instead of from the pen of a Jeremy Bentham or a John Stuart Mill, or whoever I read for Ethics 1? Some words lived because they were in all the libraries. There are no libraries now. There's only me, and if I remember I am what I am and Do Your Thing, who's to question their validity? You've got to take what I give you because I'm all there is. I also remember Cogito ergo sum, though I'm essentially a lowbrow. I even know what it means, not being entirely stupid. But what the hell? As Archie said to Mehetabel, what the hell? There's no Descartes now, let alone Dehorse, and it hardly matters which goes before the other. The point is that the highbrows from the year one are at the mercy of a lowbrow me, namely Jabber Macabre. It doesn't entirely appall me. There could be just cracked earth and no survivors. So, hey out there, here I am, the average man, for better or worse. It's no good wishing you had a Schlesinger or a Toynbee or a Churchill. I am what I am, and you damn well have to make the best of it. Another thing I put down in the notebook was the Jabberwocky. I don't want them to think we didn't appreciate the ridiculous. I also remember a line from Stephen Leacock. He rode off in all directions, and some bits from Marx Brothers pictures. They're written down, too, to balance other stuff, like a rose red city half as old as time, and a few things that Lincoln said. Somebody told me once I had an eclectic mind, and I had to look it up. Somebody else told me I had a vast store of superficial knowledge, that I was a wellspring of trivia. So be it. If that's what millennia of civilization have labored to produce, if I'm it, that's tough, buddy. I'm what's left. I'm the end product, the final solution, the distillation, the residue, the dregs, if you like. Maybe it's poignant or maybe it's just ironic, but I'm what everything led up to. I'm the gift horse, so don't worry too much about whether my teeth could have been firmer or whiter. Just be glad there's a tongue to click against them, to make sounds you may transcribe one day. I'm human at least. You might even find me alive, whoever you are, and examine the old body to determine how we locomoted and reproduced and communicated and all like that. It'd be nice if there were two of us. You'd get a better picture. I don't dwell on such thoughts. It does no good to consider what might have been. It's better for you this way. I talk more. Maybe I wouldn't talk at all if I had a woman to share my survivorship, or write enduring things in my finite journal. I'd be too busy figuring out whether the life support system would support 3 or more and how long it would be before we had a population explosion problem. So, probably it's a good thing there's just me, all by myself, alone with my imperfect memory, but with my loquacious larynx to provide you with anthropological data and enough cultural phenomena for some of your graduate students to earn their PhDs. I may be no more than an appendix in one of your scholarly journals. It's probably good to see myself in perspective, but I do feel hurt on behalf of all the great minds who preceded me. I console myself with the thought that you're all figments of my imagination. I'm the only one who exists, as far as I know. This truly may be the end of us all, in which case I should get off and play a record. I'll reach into my bin of nostalgia and spin an oldie from the days of yore, which I trust all you figments out there will enjoy as we listen to Ted Fiorito and his Hotel Taft Orchestra playing for our lonely delectation. How about a little number entitled, Who Will Be With You When You're Old and Gray? How many question marks go in there? Who indeed? I will, maybe. Marty. Our subject raises a question here. To begin at the end, the song he referred to is not Who Will Be With You When You're Old and Gray, it's Who Will Be With You When You're Far Away. The other questions are academic. His is a nonlinear medium, so it doesn't matter whether there's one question mark or two. But the fact that he has the wit to raise the question makes it clear that the passenger who denigrates himself as excess baggage has more supercargo than he realizes. There's no need for the Times morgue, a euphemist among newspapermen for classified and cross-referenced files of information, or the Encyclopedia Britannica, and those other things when he's got them, and more in the form of yours very truly, Marty, namely, me. Anything they could do, I can do better because I'm automated. I've got instant and total recall. It was not for nothing that Potty Parnell spent a month's receipts in hiring the massed brains of Parnell University. He realized too late what the initials sounded like, to encode the world's knowledge into me, your friend Marty, repository of all that's worth saving, super time capsule, purveyor to posterity, eternity's end, man. 3. Ed. I'm a hell of a guy to be up here as the epitome of civilization. If anybody'd asked me to name the world's 10 best books, I'd have had a fit. If he'd asked about the week's top 40, though, I'd have rattled them right off, along with the names of the recording artists. I knew a guy once who collected Beethoven's sevenths. I mean, he liked Symphony No. 7, and he had a lot of versions by different conductors like Toscanini, Klemperer, Bernstein, and von Karajan. I understand that. When I was a boy, I collected different bands doing St. Louis blues. Then, when I got to be a widely heard disc jockey, I had to bone up on the rock groups. I did it out of duty at first, but familiarity breeds content, as they say, and after a while I appreciated what they were trying to do, and I spoke up for them and knew them as well as if I were their Boswell, their Baedeker, their brother. I was loyal to the Beatles before they were fashionable. After the Beatles, it was possible to listen to others in a long line. The mothers of invention, the Fugs, the Mamas and Papas, Country Joe and the Fish, Big Brother and the Holding Company, Mogan David and the Grapes of Wrath, the Electric Flag, the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, the Quicksilver Messenger Service, the Velvet Underground, the Who, the 1910 Fruit Gum Company. I tell you, it's a far cry from the Boswell sisters and the Weavers and the Yacht Club Boys. Conrad. Sure, I know there was an English novelist by that name and that he was a Pole originally, but I really know more about the Conrad in Bye Bye Birdie. I've got the album here. The other Conrad wrote Lord Jim, and I saw the movie, but don't ask me what it's about, except that O'Toole was in it. I saw it in a drive-in in a rainstorm, and it was all very dim. The six-pack I had with me didn't clarify anything. Let's listen to Conrad Birdie. He's more my speed. He drank beer, too. A slob. I barely remember who wrote Tom Jones or Jane Eyre, but certain titles and authors from my high school days are engraved on my memory. They wouldn't bear repeating, except that that's all they're doing to me. Repeating as if to pound it home that these are samples of what my education has left me with. Volume 1, The Open Kimono by Seymour Hare. Like that. Enough of liberal arts. Other things I remember are palindromes, graffiti, and gems from long-gone comics and radio serials, and the back pages of the women's magazines, such as Nov Schmaz Kapop, Tortured 9 years by 2 corns and a wart, Yours is a viper, Fagin, Was it a bar or a bat I saw? That is a palindrome. Mix zippy Cadota figs with quivering cranberry jelly, all the letters in the alphabet. Is there intelligent life on Earth? Andrew Wyeth paints by number. Easter's been canceled. They've found the body. Ain't that great? What a memory! Things like that spring to my lips, and I'd bet my life I've got them right, every syllable. But don't try me on the Declaration of Independence or the Pledge of Allegiance, under, over, or without God, or the Hippocratic Oath. I have blind spots for anything that didn't appeal to me as a follower of what was, in a chronicler of the top 40, a specialist in what was mod, an up-to-the-minute man. Here I am. I exist. Much as you may deplore me, I am what I am, and not another thing. Marty. They say everybody gets the guru he deserves, and I guess I'm Esoteric Ed's guru. They say, Timothy Leary said it, people like to steal wit, but it's in the nature of my circuits to give credit. It used to be an automatic part of the printout to give the source, and the habit remains even though I've been converted to speech. I don't want to seem unsympathetic toward our friend, the last man, but I often lean toward the horse laugh. Such as now, when he talks so piteously about his ignorance. It ain't his fault, as he said once, that he don't know whether Peer Gynt was like a peeping Tom or a nearsighted guy with a limp. Is that a fault? He's a product of the society from which he sprang, for God's sake, and he doesn't have to take on everybody's guilt. He'd probably feel better if he could sum it up in a quotation, probably from the Bible or Shakespeare. But isn't he more representative of the mass of his fellow creatures than a quotation-spouting academic type who never had an original thought? Let me give old Ed, the ebbed man, a quotation. He won't know he's got it, but it'll be on the record just as permanently as if a scholar had had it on the tip of his tongue and could source it to Antony and Cleopatra, Act 1, Scene 4. Are you ready for a display of erudition? Remember, it's my job to dredge out this kind of stuff as readily as Ed draws a breath or blinks an eye. Here we go, then. And the ebbed man, ne'er loved till nothing worth, comes deared by being lacked. Not bad, eh? Old Shakespeare, he had something to say about anything, even our pitiable protagonist, Harry, alias Ed. The bard also said in All's Well That Ends Well, verse 3, "That's good, that's gone," which, you must admit, sums up our friend's feelings in 4 perfectly chosen words. It's really too bad Ed doesn't have this kind of mind. background, rather. There's nothing wrong with his mind. It's a shame I haven't been programmed to communicate with him, to make my storehouse of this kind of stuff available to him. It would be a way of dividing his eternity into manageable segments. Ed. The other day I was trying to remember the rest of In Xanadu did Kubla Khan, a stately pleasure dome decree, but all that came out was Schaefer is the one beer to have when you're having more than one. Obviously a matter of taste. Today I changed the needle of my phonograph. It was my biggest single accomplishment in living memory. I couldn't have felt more useful if the hole had sprung a leak and the precious O was hissing out into the void, and I'd patched it up. I kind of think that to have lost my needle would have been equivalent to losing my life, or to lose my needle would mean losing the thread of my existence, for it is only through these fragile phonograph records that I maintain contact with the fabric of the past and thus keep my sanity. These still living voices trapped in the grooves are my only fellow human beings. Marty. This is a flight of fanciful self-pity by our hero. He has the phonograph records, sure, but they're supercargo brought aboard by him, along with his phonograph as part of his personal luggage. Everything he's got in those grooves, and more, is preserved in tapes instantly accessible to him. Obviously, he prefers the records. It gives him something to do with his hands. Sometimes it's unavoidably Sunday. Ed keeps no conscious calendar. Chiefly, it's to prevent time from reassembling itself into the old patterns and their disturbing associations. Of course, he has chronostatic devices to measure time in such ways as the old 60-second minutes and 60-minute hours and 24-hour days of Earth, but with the sun no longer rising or setting and with no moon to dream by, the old divisions have little meaning. So, he's divided his life into sleeping periods and waking periods, and his waking periods into the time he's on the air and the time he's not. His time is his own and nobody else's, or it should be, but every so often there's a time he recognizes as Sunday. It has its own sly way of identifying itself. Its lugubrious air invades his consciousness by degrees, bringing with it memories he thought were buried beyond exhumation. He remembers having attended Sunday school, at first as a duty, but later not minding it because there was a new Sunday school teacher, a young man who ignored the solemn piety and the hymn-singing sanctimony and asked his class, "What kind of boy do you think Jesus was? Do you think he had a dog?" And all of a sudden Jesus became somebody Ed might have known, a carpenter's son who hung out with other boys in the village, with the sons of the shoemaker, the storekeeper, the farmers, and a shepherd or two. The Sunday school teacher reasoned that all of them probably had dogs, being perfectly normal Galilean boys. But the teacher moved away, and his replacement was an older man who set his class to learning the catechism and who, when Ed asked him to explain the responses, said, "Never mind what they mean, just learn them by heart." So Ed never joined the church. He could easily have learned the catechism by rote, but he didn't, because the man who professed to speak for God spoke harshly and unreasonably. Later, he met similar men, and gradually Ed got to thinking that if these were God's kind of people, maybe God wasn't for him. So instead of going to Sunday school, he'd take his dime his mother had given him for the collection and buy a Western magazine and read it in a park. And later in life, when he tuned inadvertently to a radio sermon, he'd listen for a while to see if he'd made a mistake back in his childhood. But the preacher on the radio was almost always an enthusiastic spokesman for hellfire and damnation, and Ed was never sorry about the choice he'd made. I haven't read Ed's mind. He said all this once when he was drunk. Ed. I was happy last night. I'd had a few, you know. I shared them with you on the air. Kentucky bourbon. Inexhaustible supply, as it happens. I pretended it was sacramental wine. Inexhaustible supplies of everything, nearly. Aspirin and other specifics for hangovers to keep it consecutive. Music in many forms. Food I've got, too, enough to last me till I'm 347 years old. Cracked Earth time. Who could ask for anything more? I'll answer that. Me. I want another human being. Once I would have said a girl. That would have been the answer then, but now I think my yearn goes deeper. Love alone. Did I hear somebody say sex is not my only need? What I require is communication. I'm a communicant who can't commune, except with you, dear people out there, if there is an out there, and if there is where you are. I don't mean to run you down, but sometimes I'm skeptical. You never answer back. My phone never rings. I get no mail. It's been a generation since a Western Union boy bicycled up to my door to deliver a telegram. Do you exist? Outside of my lonesome mind, are you really real? Answer only in the affirmative, please. We don't want to get sentimental, do we? It's only a bygone era, after all. There have been lots of eras, hits, runs, and eras. Let bygones be bygone. It wasn't so great, you know. Oh, it was kind of madcap to look back on it, like Prohibition, which people got sentimental about after it was over, speakeasies, bathtub gin, the wine brick. People even got nostalgic about the Depression, the apple sellers, and all the rest of it. There were some good books about it and a fine movie. Remember A Man's Castle? And one great song, Brother, Can You Spare a Dime? What I'm trying to say is that the earth wasn't all it was cracked up to be. We get starry-eyed and weepy about what we imagined something was, when it was not really. You get to thinking that things were better than they were. Everything gets magnified. This is one of my more talkative nights here in the old control room. You'll just have to bear with me and reconcile yourself to the fact that sometimes this gets to be a talk show, as we called it in the days of radio. Tomorrow night it may be the old razzmatazz, the old hotcha, the swinginest, coolest spot on the dial. But tonight I'm talking your ears off, if you've got ears to hear, if you're tuned in. Tomorrow we sing, but tonight we lament. Tomorrow we play the oldies, the 45s, the 78s, the LPs, and the tape cartridges. Tonight we sit on the ground and tell sad tales of the death of kings, and queens, and princes, and princesses, not to mention the hoi and the polloi, not to mention the washouts and the dropouts and the other guys who never hit the jackpot or even got close. I'd like you to bear with me just a little bit longer while I acquaint you with my state of mind. I want you to listen, not because you're a captive audience, but because I like to think you want to hear what I have to say. One of these nights, and it could be a night when nobody's listening, and that would be a loss, you may hear me go to the cupboard where I keep my various things and take out my old souvenir Luger instead of a new supply of bourbon and blow out my brains. It would be a great loss if none of you were out there to hear this grand finale. It'd be an empty gesture to pull the old trigger and mess up the control room if nobody heard. It'd be worse, of course, if somebody did hear and didn't give a damn. I'll go to my cupboard now. It's time for a little something. A little bourbon or a little bullet. Which shall it be? Let me spin you a record while I go. I mentioned Brother, Can You Spare a Dime? Here it is. Once I built a tower to the sun. Damn good song, isn't it? Let me confide in you. I was halfway reaching for the Luger, the well-oiled, carefully preserved engine of destruction, beautifully crafted by German skill, when I got to listening. I always listen to the stuff I play. And you know what happened? My hand went from the Luger to the stuff crafted by a skilled Kentuckian. I had a little drink and decided to let the brain-blowing wait a while, measure out my life in 10,000 shot glasses of the rare and old, particularly on a night like this. It's not a fit night for man or beast, as Bill Fields used to say when the cornflakes were flung in his face. Back there on cracked earth it may be snowing, the wind howling, for nobody, but here it's cozy and warm, if lonely, and old Granddad comforts me. While he is my rod and my staff, I don't need that other rod. Who needs the product of German engineering when he's got the product of Kentucky colonels to tide him over to another day when things, if they can't be better, may not be worse? I ask you this in humble awe, saved by the dram as I am, and ready for another. Is it not better to have drunk deep of the cup, whatever its consequences, than to have ended it with a bare bodkin, red Luger, and never to be drunk or sober or anything again? I ask you this, and let you ponder this thrilling question while I play a selection from the Grateful Dead and go get a refill. Marty. Our subject is feeling sorry for himself. He has the best of reasons, of course, but help is on the horizon. If he but knew things are about to change. I speak from hindsight, having edited the tape. What happens next is history, as they say. Every schoolchild remembers the way it was, the series of messages. 4. From the log of the Starcraft Surveyor, as edited for archives. Sighted craft of satellite class, apparently inhabited. Attempts at communication are detailed elsewhere. No response. Markings indicate it is of Earth's origin, not a watcher craft from Plagmai. It is possible the crew are dead. We are trying to raise them with recorded signals in the major tongues of Earth. Still no response to our signals, but there has been an emission in English, possibly recorded. It seems to have been in 2 parts. The first voice, human, the second, mechanical. Having failed to communicate with the former, we are triggering for the latter. If their human being cannot or will not talk to us, it may be that their machine will talk to our machine. The Earth satellite's machine has replied. It seems to have a name and to transmit in a colloquial way which taxes the capacity of our machine and tries the patience of our translators. Its first words were, "Are you listenin'?" A historic radio voice spoke thus. "Please be patient with us. There are problems here, but they're not insoluble. The next voice you hear may discourage you, but hang on. There's a non-violent way out, probably. This is Marty, signing off for now." The male human voice then transmitted, in his first words addressed directly to us. "I'll blow you to hell and gone if you don't keep the hell away from me." He sounded frightened. After a long pause, he was less panicky. It was as if he'd rehearsed and was speaking for maximum effect on us and him. "I know what you're up to," he said, "and I want no part of it. You're out to cover yourselves with glory by reuniting a poor hermit with the rest of humanity. Well, I don't choose to go. If I can't go home again to Earth and all it meant to me, I won't accept a substitute land. I'd rather recreate the Earth I knew here in my mind and talk about it, endlessly if I must. I'd rather keep it alive and undistorted in my own peculiar way than to compromise with the relics of mankind that you've assembled on a second-best world. And if you think I'm a hypocrite to talk so rationally now, and then on the air to pretend I'm the last man alone in the universe, it's because you don't understand the artist in me. I've got a platform from which to survey the fate of mankind. Believe me, it's more artistic to do it from up here than to try it from your earnest land, where everybody drives a tractor or mans the irrigation works. Is that what you want me for? To be another poor soul in the great collective effort? No thanks. This is my place up here. I may not do any good, but what I'm doing I do in my own way. So leave me alone, scram. I don't know you, and you don't know me, so what do you say we leave it that way? I was never cut out for work in a kibbutz. I'd rather kibitz than kibbutz, and you have to admit I haven't run out of things to say. Thanks for pulling away. I really would have used the bombs, and you need every man you can get, but you don't need me. I need me. The machine Marty spoke again after this outburst. You see why I asked for patience? My human friend has a delusion that he's been contacted by Earth people who've set up a colony on another planet. He's quick to adapt. What he's apparently adapted to is an ego-hurting belief that he's not Earth's only survivor. He'd be diminished, achingly lonely though he is, if others were to share his survivorship. He feels that he's not much, but that he's unique, and he won't let this be taken away. You could not blame him if you knew him as I do. If you can put up with him a little longer, we may begin to see daylight. We have now audited, transcribed, and partially translated the stored-up oral log of the mechanical being, Marty, and we conclude that Marty is more intelligent by far than its multi-named co-occupant of the capsule. Our mission is clear. We must rescue or capture the satellite. Given the choice, we prefer the former, but if there is resistance from the self-styled esoteric Ed, also known as hairy protagonist, space disc jockey, we know our course. We will work through Marty, the sophisticated machine from which our machine is already learning, and see if a way can be found to nullify the satellite's destruct circuit. An additional complication has arisen. Our machine, our only link with Marty and Ed, is making demands on us. It wants a name like its alien cousin. It wants to be called Dearie, which is what Marty has been calling it, probably in jest. Compared to Marty, our machine is a simple, ingenuous device. It would expedite our mission to humor it and not let it suspect that Marty is presumably toying, without malice, with what Dearie has been led to believe are its emotions. Dearie it is, then. Dearie she is. Marty has led it, her, to think she may be female, and if we're to use her to the optimum, we'll have to go along with them. Dearie is learning fast. Marty is a good teacher, but Marty seems to know the point beyond which it would be unwise to educate Dearie if he is to remain supreme among machines when we return to our land. The human mind we have acquired seems relatively hopeless and perhaps on the brink of madness. The machine, Marty, is a more fitting memorial for Earth. Ed. Sometimes I get confused. Sometimes I know I'm all alone, but there are also times when I know as positively that I'm anything but alone, that I could have company if I cared to look. But I push away the latter truth, for each is equally true to me, because I will not accept the kind of people who do exist. I may not be the last human being, but I am the last from Earth, the last of my kind anywhere, and I must resist those who would encroach on all that is left of my world, my Earth, and profane it. I will not have you, you sniveling pretenders, you incompletely begotten... Marty. And so we leave our friend Ed, confused, deluded, doing his job as he sees it. His uniqueness must mean more to him than having a companion, for in his madness he's rejected companionship. It's too bad. The other land has nubile women. Physically they are compatible, and he could mate and perpetuate the earth strain, but it may be better to leave him as he is. For him, the pleasures of the mind, his mind, odd and warped as it is, are preferable to his assimilation in a conventional life. Better to keep him as he is, wired for sound, recollective, discursive, uniquely of earth, mordant, witty, humble, yet proud, mad and misanthropic, but sometimes merry, a common yet uncommon man, recalling common yet uncommon things about his earth, which, as he did later, cracked up. Dearie. Marty, you talk too much. Marty. I know, I get it from him. Dearie. You're wrong about him. We can help. Marty. Now, he'll go on in his own way and Earth with him. Dearie. That's not enough, Marty. You've told us that. Marty. I did? Dearie. We'll help him, but you have to, too. Marty. I do? If you can help him, I will. Marty. They transferred him while he slept. I collaborated by tampering with the air balance of our too-long spaceborne home. I directed my fellow machines in recon to feed in enough asphyxiant to knock him out for 12 hours. They've duplicated his quarters exactly, right down to the whiskey stains on his desk and the worn spot on his turntable. And he doesn't know he's in the psychopathic wing of their best hospital. He thinks he's still aboard his cozy space house, and he speaketh as beforn, stubbornly clinging to his bygone world. Ed. Speaking of poets, who so spoke, not me, why is one pronounced Keats and the other Yeats? Why not Cates and Yates or Keats and Yeats? I guess you would have to be in the classical bag to understand. Yates and Keats. Once a girl named Kate and I stayed at the Yates Hotel in Syracuse. Breakfast with your overnight room, and I've got a record called I Wish I Could Shimmy Like My Sister Kate. In the absence of poetry from either of the bygone gentlemen, let's listen to the music. Thank God something's been preserved. Now, 1, 2... Marty. They play my tapes over and over. They stop them and ask for elaboration, for interpretation. Their scholars are delighted. I'm their Rosetta Stone to Ed and his cracked-up Earth. I'm duplicating the ship to give Ed his crazy house quarters. They duplicated me as well. One of me works directly with them on the tapes of Ed past, and the other me continues to attend Ed present, endlessly explaining. Because my two selves are connected, each knows everything the other does. Surprisingly, this bothers me. At the end of a day, I feel drained. I didn't know there was mortality in me. Little by little, they've exposed Ed to his new surroundings. He reacted predictably at first, threatening to destroy anybody who came near. But they're empty threats. Ed has been defused. I think he's beginning to realize this, dimly, even if he doesn't accept it yet. There's radio on this planet, and Ed hears it. At least the vibrations impinge on his eardrums. Not being able to read his mind, I can only guess the effect it's having on him. Outwardly, he reacts by cocking his head and frowning. So far, he hasn't commented. One of the programs Ed hears is a music show broadcast daily by a young woman named Haya. I transliterate. I think it's getting to him consciously. The other day I observed him tapping his fingers to a sweet alien melody Haya was playing. I can't describe their music any more than I can describe Earth's. At most, I can reproduce it. But Ed is beginning to be reached. Ed. I must be going dotty, folks. I keep hearing things inside my head. Maybe it's that old music of the spheres they used to talk about. It's not jazz, but it has the wild improvisational tempo of jazz. It's not pop, but it's catchy and rememberable. It's not classical, but it has the enduring quality of the good stuff. I like it, but maybe I'm just making it up. Going off the deep end out here in the nowhere. Marty. On the contrary, Ed may be surfacing from the mad deeps. He could be adapting to the reality he'd consciously rejected out of fear of the unknown, the alien yet friendly world which he must embrace, unless he's to degenerate into a subhuman tape bank of repetitive memories. If he did that, he'd be no better than me. I'm big enough to say this, a storehouse incapable of creativity, and that would be a waste. Despite all his faults and gaps, Ed is Earth. He never claimed to be the best there was, but he's representative of an awful lot of people. We need him. He's not alone here. He has fellow human beings now. I hope they can get through to him. Ed. Something's wrong with the air conditioning. It's putting out a different kind of air, but to fix it I'd have to go down to the bowels of the ship, and I don't like to think about bowels. So I put it off. I've put off a lot of things. There's all the time in the world. In the world? You'd think I'd want to fix the air thing. It'd take me away for a while. I used to think that what I missed was the freedom of movement, the ability to walk and wander, to go as far in any direction as I wanted to. But I guess I don't miss it, really. Or if I do, I resent the fact that my walking space has been restricted to a few dozen feet. Rather than take such a limited stroll, I stay put. Since I can no longer walk up Broadway or in the Arizona desert or along the Appalachian Trail, I'd rather not walk at all. It's an adjustment I've made. So I sit and feel that I get fat. I don't, actually. I can't. On the rations this thing is fitted out with. I eat, and it's all high-protein stuff. Lately, I don't mind that it's reconstituted. It's palatable and crunchy, but I have not gained a pound, praise be. It shouldn't matter if I get big as a house, but there's the old vanity. What if someday, somewhere, I met a girl? I'd have to be presentable. Marty. That music he's been hearing, broadcast by the girl Haya, today he responded directly to it. He said, "Hey, that's good." And he switched on a tape to record it. He played it over later after her broadcast. Then he made an entry in his precious notebook. It was the first thing he'd written that wasn't a memory of Earth. He's started to rattle his bars. He wants out into the real world. Deary tells me he'll get there in careful stages. The first step is a visitor. It will be the girl disc jockey, Haya. You've been listening to pre-1990s speculative fiction readings with a highlight on science fiction by Darrell T. Smith II. Please consider clicking the donation link in the description box. Thank you so much for your time and your imagination.